Hello Game Makers, this is GameMaker Rob, and in today's episode we have a few awesome features. We have a brand new shop that sells units and also items, because now items are in the game. We can equip items to our units, swap them around, and also depending on what slot you pick, only certain items will appear because only certain items will fit in a particular slot, and also only certain classes can use certain items. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I am going to show you is a brand new CSV. It's for item stats. There's going to be more stats going across here, down here. But for now, all we have is whether it can be equipped by a certain class, the cost of the item, and where is the item equipped. It's either going to be hands, chest, an accessory, or it's going to be an item. And these are all the items we have. We have a dagger, sword, short bow, etc. Some rings to boost other stats. Tombs are going to be to cast spells. And these are going to be the items, heal potion and mana potion. Okay, so if we go into OBJ main, we're going to have a brand new region. I've just put it at the bottom here. Items / inventory. We've got a couple of enumerators. We have e-items. This matches the order of the SCV here. Item stats. Again, this matches the order going down vertically. One thing I did is I wanted the stats for whether it was equipable by a certain class to match the stats inside e-stats here, this one. So, sorry, that's wrong. Characters. So 1 is fighter, 2 is archer, 3 is mage. And same thing here, 1 is fighter, 2 is archer, 3 is mage. It just makes doing a check to see whether a particular class can equip an item, makes it easier. I didn't really explain, but yes, that is a thing. Basically, the items and armor we have will only be able to be equipped by certain classes. That's the way I've decided to do this. And then, as I said, equip where it's either going to be hands, accessory, armor, item, or nowhere. We also need an array. It's going to help us say, okay, so what type of item can be equipped in left and right hand? Well, it's got to be something that can go in the hands. What kind of item can go in the chest? It's got to be an armor. What kind of item can go in the accessory? It's got to be an accessory. What kind of item goes into item 1 or item 2? It's an item. This just makes this allows us to just use one line of code to check where an item can go, rather than doing a check for every position. That's the main reason I did this. Global.items is going to be the grid of this. Basically, this is going to be loaded into a grid so we can access it. Global.inventory is going to be the player's whole inventory, so any armor, items, weapons, potions, tombs that he owns is going to be stored in this inventory. The way this inventory is going to work, it's a list, so it can only have one piece of data per entry. Every entry is going to be a particular item. So item 3 is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3 is going to be short bows. Item 2 is going to be swords. We don't need to tell the list what item it is, because whatever number in the list you're at, that's going to be the item. So all we need to know in that particular entry of the list is the quantity of the item we have. So to begin with, we're going to set the quantity of every item in the player's inventory to 0. That's what this for loop is about. And then just so we can actually start with some items, we're going to say, okay, the entry for leather chest is going to equal 2. So we have 2 leather chests. The entry for sword is going to be 2. So we start with 2 swords. And the entry for dagger is going to be 1. So we start with 1 dagger. Okay, so now because we have items, we're going to have a new sprite for that. So we have Sbr Items, and we have basically as many entries or as many indexes in this sprite as there are items. We need the first slot or image index to be blank because we need it to match this here. As you can see, the first slot is empty. Then we have a dagger, sword, short bow, bow. And you can hear we've got a dagger, sword, short bow, bow. Although these are the same sprite. It just needs to match up what we have here so that we get the correct sprite to draw. And these are of a size 32 by 32 and are centered in the middle. And I just added another sprite called Sbr Item BG, as in the background for the items. It's just basically 2 grey lines, 2 rectangles, same size as the items, centered in the middle, just for something to draw around them. That's all it's for. So now we're going to the create event of OBJ army screen. I commented out this region here where we add units to the player's army because we don't need it anymore. We're now able to buy units from the shop, which we'll do a bit later on. So we don't need this anymore. And down here, we've got a couple of new things. So we have a list called gear list. The way that the system works is when we've selected the unit and we go on to change gear, it's going to display 6 slots: left hand, right hand, chest, accessory, item 1, item 2. And when you click on one of those slots, this list is going to be populated with any items from the player's inventory, so global.inventory, any items that number 1 will fit in that slot, number 2 that can actually be used by that class. So it just means that the player will only be able to select items that will actually fit in that slot, and they don't have to kind of hunt around for a particular thing. And show gear list equals false. If this is true, we're going to display this list. Otherwise, we're not. We're probably going to have a state in the future that does this. But for expediency, I just had a boolean. And in testing, so we're going to start by adding a sword and a leather chest to butts. That's what these 2 lines of code to do. That's what these 2 lines of code do. And one thing we also need to do is in the classes and characters CSV, previously all these values were -1, but causes a strange graphical glitch when we're drawing the sprite. So we're just going to set it to 0, which means empty anyway, so that's fine. Just make sure you've made that change to the CSV. Awesome. So we didn't actually do any extra code inside the step event of the army screen. We actually do the code inside the draw GUI. So the code where we add and swap items from a unit's inventory is done in this event instead. That's because of the way that I use for loops to draw things, and it just makes it a lot more compact if I do the code within those for loops. The first thing we want to tackle is in several states already we had this code. We just wanted to draw the selected unit, but rather than have that done 3 times, we might as well check to see if the state is display options, change equipment, or change class, because these are the 3 states we want to do it, and then destroy it here. It also means that in 2 places we've commented that out, which I'll show you now. So in display options, we've commented it out there. And in change class, we've commented it out here as well. Okay, so now we have this thing here, which is brand new. So we're going to be displaying the gear of the selected unit if we are displaying options or changing equipment. That's why we've got those 2 checks there. So this first region will display this particular unit's gear. We're just grabbing the width and height of our new sprite Sbr Items. We want to know the class of the character as well. That's just so we can check what items you can use for when we populate gear list. That's all it's for. We want some starting draw coordinates. Counter is also used for drawing coordinates. I use this because I wanted something that started at 0. Normally I would use I, but I does not start at 0. It starts at something like 12 or 13 for this. So that's the only reason we use counter. So all we're doing is we are checking the stats of this particular unit from left hand to item 2. So do I have open? No. Okay, never mind. So we want to see what item this unit has equipped at the moment, and let me just open this again actually because it's useful for now. So as you can see, there's nothing equipped in most of these people's slots at the moment. The only thing we should have equipped is the 2 things we added to butts. So normally this is going to be 0, but for butts he'll have a sword and a chest item. We're going to set the drawing coordinates here. We draw the background like I said, and then we're going to draw the item itself. That's what this is done. This is for here. So if equipped item is 0, then it's just going to draw this here, 0. If he had a sword equipped, it'd go 0, 1, 2. There's a sword. If it was a chest, then it would draw this. But if there's nothing in the slot, it's just going to draw that. So this bit here is particular to changing equipment. What we're doing is we are going to check to see if the mouse is over one of these slots. That's what this line is going to do here. What this line does here is it checks basically to see whether the mouse is over the current sprites that we're drawing. It'll do this check 6 times a step because there's 6 item slots to check. If the mouse is over one of these squares, then we're going to have a green rectangle that shows that. So that's what this bit's for. We're going to draw a green rectangle. Draw set alpha. If we set it to 0.5, it makes it kind of semi-transparent. Okay, so if we're in here, the mouse is over a particular slot, and if we then click the mouse, then this is going to happen. Don't need this really. So the first thing we want to do is to clear the gear list, because that list might have items for a different slot. So we want to clear it. We then want to say, well, yes, we do want to show the gear list after we populate it. Gear goes here. So we just need to track at which particular point in the for loop we clicked. So if I is equal to left hand, then we want to save that in this variable. If I equals chest, then we want to save that in this variable. That's because we're going to use it in a different region to say, well, the new item that we're transferring is going to go into that particular entry. Slot to equip makes use of that array that we made. So if you remember, it was this array here. So we just want to know if it's a hand item, if it's an armor item, if it's an accessory item, or if it's an item, if that makes sense. So there's our two variables for tracking where the item, what the item is and where it's going to go. Then we're going to do a check for the whole of the player's inventory. We're going to ignore the empty slot because we don't need to, add empty to someone, do we? So we're going to go from dagger until less than last, which is going to be the last item, which will be a mana pot. We're going to check the quantity of that particular item. And again, if we go back to obj main, we should have 0 for most things, but we should have 2 chests, 2 swords, and 1 dagger. And then we want to see where this item that we're checking here, where it actually goes into. So if it was a dagger, it would go in the hands. If it was a healing potion, it would go in item slot. That's what this is going to store. And then basically, if the quantity of one of these items is greater than 0, and where it fits into is the slot that we clicked on. So if it goes in the hands, if we clicked on left or right hand, and this item goes in the hands, then yes, we want it. And also we need to check that the class of the unit can use the item. That's what this is for. So for example, if you look at the priest, a priest can use a dagger. He can't use a sword, can't use any of the bows. He can't even use a leather chest. But the fighter can use everything except a bow. Yeah, he can use everything except a bow, basically. So as long as all 3 of these conditions are met, we're going to add this one of these, whatever item it is, to the list. There could be a possibility where there are no items in the player's inventory that are suitable for that slot, which would mean the size of the gear list would be 0. So if the size of the gear list is 0, then we don't want to show the gear list because there's nothing to show in the first place, basically. And after all this, at the very bottom of our code in the for loop, we just want to increase counter by 1. That's just to make sure these drawing coordinates are accurate. So close this region. And then, so if we want to display the gear list, that's what we're going to do here. So if the state is change equipment and we want to show the gear list, again, set the drawing coordinates here and here. We're going to use a for loop to run through all the entries of the gear list. We're going to do the same thing as with the gear. We're going to draw background sprite, the item sprite as well. And we're going to check for the mouse here. Again, we want a green rectangle if the mouse is over it. If we click on one of our items in the gear list, then we're going to swap whatever is in the current slot with the new thing. The unit might not have anything in the current slot, but if they do, then the old item needs to go back into the player's inventory. So we need to bear that in mind as well. Current item in slot is what the unit has in that particular slot. So if we clicked on the left hand and the unit had a shield, then this current item would be a shield. The new item is whatever we just clicked on inside this for loop. That's why we're using I. So it could be replacing a shield with a different shield, or even a different weapon like a bow or something like that. If the old item is not empty, so there's actually something in that slot, then we're going to increase the player's inventory by 1 for the quantity of the item. One thing I haven't coded for this bit today is we're not adding these items back to the gear list, so you'd have to we have to run this code again, basically, to add an item back to the gear list. What I'll probably do for next time is have some kind of script that does that, so we're not doing the same thing twice. Where are we? Okay, so we're adding the old item back to the player's inventory. So regardless of whether there's an old item or not, we're then going to add the new item to the particular slot. So if it's a hand, chest, item 1, item 2, this is where it's going to go. And this is the particular character that's going to get it. And this is the item that's going to go in that value. So it would just be, it's going to basically be updating. This is the wrong sheet. It's going to be updating one of these slots, basically. One of these entries is going to change values. And because we're adding an item from the inventory, we need to remove one of those items from the quantity. That's what this line is for. It may happen that this was the last item, or the quantity was 1. So now it's going to become 0. So if the quantity of that particular item is now 0, we don't have any left in the global.inventory. So we also need to remove that item from the gear list so that we're not allowed to give it to any more units. That's what this line is going to do. And if you want, you can do what I did as well. That's like a little debug for loop. This basically shows the quantity of every item in the global inventory. It's just useful to see the numbers change when we add or swap items between characters. So let's run the game. Let's make sure this works for the army first of all. So army screen, let's check out Butts. So we can see that Butts already has 2 items. He's got a sword and a leather chest. These numbers are just for debugging purposes. It's this line here. So comment this out to get rid of the numbers drawn over the items. So if you do this, that will get rid of these numbers, but it's just good for debugging purposes. So if one of these numbers was greater than 0, but no sprite was being drawn, then we've got a problem. But so far things look pretty good. The sword is the 3rd entry for both the sprites and the CSV. It's looking good. You can see here we have 1 dagger, 2 swords and 2 chests. So if I click on this slot here, or sorry, let's go to change gear first. So you can see now we're in the change gear state. If we move the mouse around, then the boxes are highlighted to say, well, which one do we want to choose? So if I click on this one, because we have 1 dagger and more than 1 sword, we've got the option of putting a dagger or a sword there. So I can click a dagger, it'll go there. And because we have no more daggers left, it gets removed from the gear list. If I then click on the sword, you can see we have only 1 sword and we have 1 dagger back. But because we're not repopulating the gear list, it doesn't show yet. If I press backspace, and then let's go to Brian. He's also a fighter. He doesn't have any gear. Let's change his gear. That other thing I haven't done is we need to clear the gear list. That's why the sword is showing them. But if you click on one of these two areas, then he can pick from either a dagger or a sword, because there's one of each. If we click on the third one, he can have a leather chest because there's two of them. Let's give him one of those now. Let's give him a sword in that slot there. And if we click on any of the other options, there's nothing in the player's inventory that will go there. And what do we have? A dagger and chest. So if we go to item stats CSV, Sarah is a priest, and priests can use daggers, but they can't use priests. So go away. So they can use daggers, they cannot use swords, and they cannot use leather chests. So you can see we still have a leather chest and we have a dagger. So let's go to Sarah. If we go to change gear and click on this one or this one, we can choose dagger. If we go to the third option, then nothing appears because she can't use leather chests. Let's go back to butts and change gear. Click on his chest, and you can see we still have a leather chest, and he could swap it around, but it's not available to Sarah because of her class. And this will work for any of the items we have. The user interface isn't great. One thing that I did was I made the items clickable where nothing else is clickable for the army screen, and in the shop nothing is clickable. It's just up, down, left, right, enter. So I'll have to update that in a future episode. But I think now we can jump into the shop part of it. So I made a shop as a map, as you remember, but there didn't really seem much point in using OBJ test to draw a shop, and there didn't seem much point in having a whole draw event dedicated to drawing the shop like we would for a battle map. So all I did is I just took a screenshot of that map and made it into a sprite like you can see here, and the width and height 960 by 540. They match the dimensions of the viewport here so that it will fit in the whole screen. So that's the extra sprite we have. So if we go into the player create event, we have a new enumerator, this one here, shop. So when we click on the shop option, the state is going to get set to this. And the other change inside OBJ player is inside the world menu region, and it's this code here. Basically, if we move onto the shop option and we press enter, we want to know the map type because we want to check if it's a shop. So if the world action is shop and the map type is shop, then we're going to set the state of the player to shop, and we are going to create an instance of OBJ shop just as we have with OBJ army screen. We haven't created this object yet, so we're going to do that now. And in the create event, we have an enumerator. It's a bit similar to the army screen enumerator. It has display options, items and units. Basically, when you go into a shop, you can either buy items or buy units. You can't sell anything right now. That's another thing that I need to do to update it. The initial state of the object is going to be display options, and the first option is going to be items. We want to be able to show the text for these options which is what this array is going to be for. And each shop is going to have a list of units and a list of items that it sells. For now, they're all going to have the same. They're all going to have a fighter or an archer to sell as units. And for items, they're going to sell an axe, a short bow, or leather chest. There is no limit to these items. You can buy as many as there are. I'm not even taking any money from the player. I'm just allowing you to buy whatever you want, basically. So inside the step event of the shop object, we've got some regions that are very similar to the army screen. We get to reuse one of our scripts as well. If we are in the display options state, if we press up or down, we want to switch between items and units. That's all this is going to be for. If we are in the items state and we press left or right, then we want to switch between any of the items stored inside this list. If we are in the units state and we press left or right, then we're going to switch between the units stored in this list. Pretty straightforward. Then if we press enter, we're going to be choosing an option or potentially buying something. If we're in the display options and we press enter, then whatever option we're on, we want to change the state to that option. It's going to be either items or units, and we want to reset selected option to 0. If the state, however, is items, we want you to check to see if the player can afford it, but I haven't coded it yet. So we're just going to say they can afford it. We're going to check what item it is. That's what this line is for. And then we're just going to increase the inventory of the player for that item by 1. It's pretty simple. If we are in the units state, it's basically the same as this. We check if the player can afford it. Not coded yet. We add unit to the player's army. First of all, we want to know if it's a fighter or an archer. That's what's going to be stored inside unit. We're going to use this script to add a unit of that class to the character's stats grid. And then we're going to set that unit to be in the player's team, just like we did in the testing part for the army screen. If we press backspace, then if we are not on display options, then we want to go to it and set selected option to be items. Otherwise, if we are already on display options, then we want to destroy the shop and reset the player's state back to the world menu, just like we do inside the army screen. And last of all, if we go into the draw Gui region, this one here, so we're going to draw the shop background here. If we are display options, then set the font, set the alignment of the text, change the color to white, and for as many options there are, which there's 2, set the color to gray. However, if selected option equals I, which it will do for at least one of them, then set the color to white. So it's going to highlight it, and then just draw the text. So it's going to draw 2 things. Then in items, again, we're just going to draw an item for as many entries as there are in list of items. These 2 variables just get the width and height of the sprite, so we don't have to do it more than once. We're going to set up some draw coordinates, and we're going to check which item we're trying to draw. Then we draw the item, we draw the background for the item, and then we draw the item here. If this particular item is the item we have selected so far by pressing left or right, then we want to draw a white rectangle around it, kind of similar to how we draw a green rectangle whenever we move a mouse over the items in the army screen. Here if we have pressed left or right, whatever item is then selected, we're going to draw a white rectangle over that spot. And then for units, very similar to this one really. We're going to use draw scale to draw it larger. We're going to set unit width and unit height to 3 times the height and width of the actor sprite. And we're going to set the starting draw coordinates. Then for as many entries inside the list as there are, we're going to use our script to draw the unit. And again, whenever selected option equals I, we're just going to draw the army selection sprite above it. And that's it. So if we now run the game, so let's go to the shop. Let's buy some items. Let's get an axe and a bow. Press backspace. Units. Let's get 1 fighter and 2 archers. And if we go now to the army screen, we've got a fighter and 2 archers that we just bought. If we change the class of the archer to say a warrior, you can see I just noticed in the top right it says kill. I should say class surely. So we've changed his class to warrior, this guy here, but his name is archer. So even though it says archer here, he's actually warrior. So anyway, let's check the items we bought as well. So if we go to butts and then change gear and then click on this slot here, you can see we can choose from any of these items here. Let's give him an axe. And then let's go to Sarah. Can she use any of these things? Just a dagger. And then let's give this fighter some stuff as well. Let's give him a sword and a bow, some armor. And if we exit out of the army screen and go back in, all of our changes are saved. You can see Butts has got an axe, a sword, and a leather chest. This fighter has a bow, a sword, and leather chest. And that's how we're going to equip our fighters. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. I got quite a lot done this time, so I'm glad for that. We'll make some small changes to the shop and army screen next time, and then I think we can move on to the battle stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.